And we have returned. You're listening to CSC Talk Radio. This is Beth Ann. We're visiting with John Dans. We're talking about Don Jans. We're visiting about our rights and our entitlements. Everybody wants to give you free stuff, and there ain't nothing free. It's going to cost somebody somewhere, and it's going to cost you eventually, because once you become dependent, you lose your independence, and which is what we're supposed to be celebrating today. Don, it always amazes me. I have always had this pride in this nation, and I don't know why. I don't think I grew up any different than anyone else, but it's just something that's always been in me, that I've been proud of this nation. Not everything in this nation. We've had our moments in this nation where we've had things that we didn't need to be proud of, but we're still a young nation in comparison to the other foreign lands around, and we're still suffering through this experiment of our founding fathers of men ruling themselves instead of being ruled by government, and we seem to be failing again. But I'm going to kind of turn it back over to you, and then I want us to discuss the Bill of Rights one at a time.
Okay. Great. Just a quick introduction into that, and your comment on how we're different. We are truly a different country. Truly, absolutely different. Our revolution was different. Everything about us is different. When we go back and we study the days of the 1700s and even prior. And in my book, Road to Tyranny, I talk about that a lot. And one of the big differences we have is we were founded on the basis of individualism. In other words, the individual is paramount. The individual can rise to whatever level they want. And we celebrate those individuals being independent, being free thinkers, being idea people, being creators. Where prior you were told what you could and couldn't do, and you could not be an individual who left what the collective or the state said you could be. So if the state said you had to be on the farm, and you had to be a worker on the farm, then that's what you had to do. If the state said, no, you can come in and you can be a part of the bureaucracy, that's what you could do. All of a sudden, our country said, no. Throw that out the window. The individual can determine what they will and will not do. So it was a completely different concept, and this is what has truly, truly set us apart, and this is what the people are arguing about today. The Marxist progressive or the Democrat Party is saying, no, we want to go back to where the government controls what we can and cannot do. And that comes into rights and entitlements. And a right is given by God. The only role government the only role government has in the right is to protect that right. If I have the right to free speech, Beth Ann, that does not detract from your right to free speech.
Right.
If I have the right to life, you don't have to contribute anything to that. You don't take anything from it. You have the same right I have. We're not exchanging anything for my right to life, your right to life, my right to liberty, your right to liberty. An entitlement is the opposite. In order for an entitlement to exist, there has to be some organization that sets up rules. It sets up qualifications. It sets up ideas as to what you can and you cannot have, such as Social Security. The government has established a rule as to who can and cannot participate, who can and cannot receive. Now, in order to have that right, the government has to, or the organization that's controlling it, has to take from somebody else, such as universal health care. They set up the rules, and then they say, now, in order to provide this right to those we say qualify, we have to take from somebody else so they can have that. That's an entitlement. It is not a right. And what the left has always tried to do is they've always tried to conflate these two ideas. And they always try and tell us that entitlements really are rights. And they do this for two reasons. They do it to get people to accept these so that they can control them, and they do it to put shame on those of us who would go out and say, no, entitlements are entitlements. Now I'm being shamed because I'm being selfish. And so they think this will force us to conform. And so when we look at these, when the entitlements were never part of our Constitution or part of our founding, Madison said, the government is not to be a charity. So he's saying the government should never, ever be the giver or the organizer of entitlements.
You know, government can't fix anything.
That's where our differences are.
Yeah, government doesn't fix things. They're not going to fix health care. They're not even approaching it in the way that they could fix health care. They're just trying to...
No, it's destructive.
Yeah, it's totally different. And, you know, when you were talking about the stations in life, we're supposed to have moved away from that. And I see some of the arrogance in these elected officials that believe themselves to be above us, their peasants, who they're supposedly supposed to be representing. And that bothers me greatly because, unfortunately, people are they're kind of accepting some of it. And, you know, they're not above us. They're supposed to be employees for us. They're supposed to be statesmen. In that reading that I had earlier, it talked about they brought in their statesmen. You know, they didn't bring in politicians or just lawyers. They brought in their statesmen. And they care about where they were and where they came from and who they were representing.
This is one of the areas that really separated us at the time we became a nation. Mm-hmm. When you go back and you look prior to that, you always had government in a sovereign position. You had a king, you had an emperor, you had a czar. What they said was the law.
Yes.
If they said you can think this or you can think that, you can say this or you can say that, that was the law. That's what you could or you could not do. The people, they were servants or serfs or slaves to that sovereign government. And all of a sudden we said, no, that's wrong. We're going to turn this upside down. Now the people will be the sovereign and the government will be the servant. Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence said, governments are instituted amongst men, and they derive their just power from the consent of the governed. The governed who has that superiority. It's the government who has that sovereignty. I mean, it's the government who is a servant. It's the people who have that sovereignty, the people who have that superiority. And this turned the world upside down. This is why the sovereigns in Europe were so upset that the American Revolution had taken place. And the American Revolution was successful because it said, hey, you people, you're now in danger as well. Catherine the Great fretted this idea. She was afraid of this idea. Why? Because all of a sudden, American people said, you're not sovereign, Catherine the Great. Now, she was in Russia, of course, and didn't affect her directly.
What if her people got that idea? Well, here's what it says in the second paragraph of the opening of the Declaration of Independence. It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. And that's just the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. We're headed into another break. Oh my gosh, it's a good thing we lined up 2 shows for this, Dawn. You're listening to CSC Talk Radio. We're talking about our rights and our independence. And we will be right back.